Okay, welcome. So today I want to offer some reflections about the grooming gangs and why is it in British society we don't seem to do enough to protect the children. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the inquiries, talk about ICSA, and I'm going to talk a little bit drawing from Sarah Ockwell-Smith's book, Because I Said So, where she talks a bit about childism and why that seems to be the case in Britain. So let's begin. So over the last week or so, there's been a lot of press, a lot of coverage about the grooming gangs. Now, the grooming gangs have been, rape gangs have been going on in Britain for about 25 years. And there has been documentaries. Channel 4 did a documentary 2004, 2005. And essentially what the press has done, what the government has done is squashed it, pushed it under the surface. They've often arrested the parents of the children rather than actually arresting the perpetrators. So it's just to ask the question today, why is it that we don't seem to do more to protect the children? So begin with an inquiry. We're talking at the moment about doing an inquiry for the grooming gangs. And I think in principle, it's a good idea, but just reading, and I'll put it into the description, an article by the BBC, and this is from Lord Norton. This was last year, talking about inquiries. And the figures are quite shocking, actually. There's been 69 inquiries between 1990 and 2017, and it's cost £630 million has been spent on those 69 inquiries, and the average time has been about 2 years. But what he's saying basically is that we're not really doing anything about it. And they quote from this report in this BBC article, there was a perception that the inquiries were established to kick the problem into the long grass. So they were almost created not to deal with the issue, but to not have to look at it, just saying, oh, we're looking at this. I mean, the ICSA, which is the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, ran from about 2014, 2015 for about 8 years to about 2022, 21, 22. And that might be a lot less, 6 or 7. But essentially it cost 193 million. And at the end, there was a recommendation. They made 20 recommendations for things like mandatory reporting and other such things to be put into place. This finished 2 years ago. The Conservatives did nothing. The Labour have since been in 6 months. They've done nothing. So out of those recommendations, cost nearly £200 million. How many have actually been put in place? None at all. Now, with the scandal around the grooming gangs, it looks like they're actually starting to talk about mandatory reporting. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has been out in the press the last day or so saying, actually, yes, let's do something. But, this is incredible that still to this day, if you see sexual abuse in most Western countries and you don't report it, you are going to be prosecuted. You're going to be put away, prison or fined. In the UK, nothing happens to you. And I've said this before, that if you see a financial crime and you do not report it, you get up to 10 years in prison and an unlimited fine. If you see child being raped or hurt, nothing happens to you if you don't report it. So this is what is, this needs to be brought to the surface, that essentially these inquiries often don't work, and what I see for Britain is that we are a bureaucracy. And in this book here, High Performance, it talks about 5 different types of cultures. It talks about bureaucracies, and he says in that book, this is from I think it was Stanford professors James Barron and Michael Hannon. Decisions supposed to be made by a committee. This is a bureaucracy. In practice, they frequently weren't made at all. And I see this is Britain at the moment, is as I'm trying to think, Dominic Cummings, the aide to Boris Johnson, in quite a lot of the podcasts that I've been listening to over the last few months, he says that politics, British, Parliament, it's inept. And I see this, this is another instance of where we are being inept. We're not keeping the children safe. And so if I then segue onto Sarah Ockwell-Smith's book, and I spoke to her on my podcast last year, and she says, the mistreatment of children, the most vulnerable members of society, is neither funny nor just. The trouble is, it is ingrained into our society. It has become acceptable, advisable even. We celebrate leaving babies to cry alone at night in their cribs in the name of sleep training, teaching them to self-soothe, even though self-soothing at such a young age is developmentally impossible. We live in a world where people think nothing of isolating a child from their family and peers, shaming them, punishing them, and often reducing them to tears in the name of entertainment for television shows and social media clips, all without the child's consent. Our governments seem hell-bent on making life as difficult as possible for families, and particularly for children, the only constituents who don't get a say in their futures. And she talks in here a little bit about how, it's illegal for an adult to hit another adult. It's illegal, it's frowned upon for a child to hit an adult. But still in Britain, certainly England and Wales, it's still legal for an adult to hit a child. Scotland, they've outlawed this. But, why? Why is it okay for us to do that, but it's not okay for me to hit someone else? Even if another kid hits each other, well, no, that's not okay, but it's okay for an adult. And yeah, it's just fascinating to really think about that it seems like we just don't care about children. We don't listen to them when they are told about sexual abuse. In my school, there was sexual abuse. I was sexually abused at my school. And people went to the teachers. I personally didn't, because I didn't trust the teachers. But the teachers just said, stop crying about it. It's nothing. You're lucky to be here. In my school, teachers were seen as gods. It was like they were put on this pedestal. Children were seen as not important, and their views. And I'm hearing this with the grooming gangs, and the what's coming out is that the police are not listening to the children, and they're not listening to the parents. And this kind of links into Nick Duffell's work here. Often the victims of the grooming gangs are, working class children. And he says here, this is talking about the leaders who've been to boarding school. That's what a lot of my work is. He says, how might this affect the other end of society? Could it be that the British working class as an entire group have been suffering projective identification, meaning the vulnerable part of the leaders, the Boris Johnsons, the David Camerons, put onto the working class, been suffering projective identification from the upper classes? Have they been standing in for the stupid, messy, incompetent children the latter wish to distance themselves from in their own collective psyche? Could this explain some of the unhappiness, the lack of self-respect, the grimness that sometimes marks the British working class as distinct from their counterparts in Europe? So I think it's just to notice, could it be because of the trauma of our leaders? They can't engage with that part within themselves. They learn to dissociate in boarding school. And now, therefore, it's like, as Peter Levine says, the man who is hit as a child will feel compelled to hit as an adult. That's kind of the trauma. So the man who learned to hate the child within him is going to learn to hate children as an adult. So, yeah. The other thing here the grooming gangs, why does Britain not do more to protect its children, is that, and I repeat this over and over again in these videos, is the duty of care. The duty of care in the UK is always to the institution. And this has come out with Justin Welby. We spoke about this a few months ago. Duty of care is to the institution over the children, over the people. And, if it's going to harm the institution, then we cover it up. And this is what's happened with the grooming gangs. Again, it's 25 years that it's been bubbling under the surface. And no, we're not going to deal with it, not going to deal with it. And my concern with this idea of an inquiry is that nothing will be done. They'll spend 2-3 years, but nothing will be actioned, because I almost see this bureaucracy. The people who earn their living is from these inquiries. The lawyers, the government, the civil service. That's their livelihood, and nothing gets done. It's just ridiculous. I was listening to Douglas Murray just in preparation for this, and he says Britain is good at ignoring primary problems. We put it on someone else. It says, oh, it's that person, they're to blame. It's Tommy Robinson, he's to blame. Or it's this person, they're to blame. It's Elon Musk. Rather than, wait a minute, we're allowing children to be raped. We're allowing children to be sexually abused. And we're not doing anything to protect them, but we're blaming. It's like we're always trying to distract, because it's all about the unconscious. It's all about our own inability to look within, and therefore we project it out onto others. So what's the solution? I feel, it is to get this mandatory reporting in, that it becomes law. You've got to report. If you don't, you will be fined or put in prison. And I also feel that there has to be a total overhaul of Whitehall. As Dominic Cummings is saying, it's totally inept. It's, I think what Elon Musk is doing in the US of, streamlining everything, that needs to happen in Britain. The systems we have in place do not work. They do not work. And I really feel that the grooming gangs and what this has brought to the surface is time for change. Our documentary about boarding school and the trauma and how that impacts our leader, that's going to be out in the next few months. And it'll be another thing, right? Time for change. These boarding schools creating these traumatized leaders. We don't want this anymore. Time for change. So, just some ideas there. So please do comment below. What do you think? Some thoughts, anything maybe I've missed out. Why do you feel that Britain doesn't seem to care about its children? What's all that about? So thank you for listening. And I've got a podcast going live this Friday with Anne Power, who's a psychotherapist, an author, talking about attachment and boarding school. And fascinating, talking about secure attachment, how if you go to boarding school and you're securely attached, meaning you had a good home life, it's actually quite devastating for you. So it's not a great preparation. It's the opposite. So blessings, and speak soon. Bye for now.